My name is Dave Hollenbach, the host of From Embers to Excellence. My goal is to explore the many facets of leadership from the perspectives of some amazing people. In addition to leadership, I like to discuss mental health, PTSD, and overcoming adversity. If you have a favorite episode, I would love to hear about it. Message me through social media or my website, and I will share some free tools to help you achieve your goals. Please like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you haven't purchased your copy of my book, Fireproof, please grab a copy today. Thanks for listening. Today, I'm speaking with Roy Osing. He is the author and audacious leader. He is the former president and CMO, entrepreneur with over 40 years of successful and unmatched executive leadership experience in every aspect of business. As president of a major data and internet company, his leadership and audacious, unheard-of ways took the company from its early stage to $1 billion in annual sales. He is a blogger, content marketer, and mentor to young professionals. As an accomplished business advisor, he is the author of the No Nonsense book series, Be Different or Be Dead. With the Audacious Unheard-of Ways I Took a Startup to $1 billion in Sales as his 7th book in that series, and that was released earlier this year. So, Roy, thank you so much for agreeing to have this conversation with me, and just thank you for everything that you're doing.
I'm grateful to have the opportunity, Dave. Really, so thanks.
Well, and earlier you said that you're hailing from Vancouver in Canada.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, it's sunny out, which is rather strange for this time of year. But it's sunny, but it's cold. It's about Fahrenheit. It's about 32, something like that today. So hopefully that goes away soon.
All right. Well, I want to start off with the time and place where it all began for you. Where were you born and raised, and what was life like growing up?
Well, I was born and raised in Kimberley, British Columbia, Canada. It's a place in the interior of the province, and it was a mining town then. And matter of fact, it was the largest producer of lead zinc in the world, and so it was a small town. Wonderful place to grow up. I mean, wonderful place to ski and learn how to hunt and fish with my dad, etc. And so, from the point of view of development, it was amazing. It really was. Close friends, everybody knew each other, which sometimes can be a bit of a problem, but for the most part, it was super. And it taught me some pretty basic values around integrity and honesty and friendship and love. And so yeah, but like any small town, it's eventually it's time to leave, and so I ended up going to university in Vancouver. And got married here, and we have spent our 55 years together in
Wow.
Vancouver.
So you've been married for 55 years.
55 years, and I don't know how she can stand it, to be honest with you. I mean, gee whiz. I mean, I'm the luckiest guy in the world to have somebody care for me that long. Geez, I must be doing something right, Dave. I don't know what it is, but
Hey,
something, right? Yeah.
Well, just to get a greater sense of what it was like for you, and maybe some of those foundational experiences. Were you into sports? I mean, it's like required to play hockey, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm an only child. Okay, so I say that, I declare that because in many ways, it kind of defined the sort of environment that I found myself in, and the environment that I had to learn how to, quote, survive in. Because without siblings and so forth, there's a heck of a lot of independence that you need to get awful quick. And so fortunately, my mother I was once asked by a podcast host who was my greatest influence in the world, and I'd never had that question before, and it just popped right into my head. There's no question about it. My mother was the greatest influence. She imprinted everything that was strong in her. And so I learned at a very young age about strength and how you needed to be strong in order to move forward. Again, particularly when you don't have siblings, okay, around to learn from, etc. And I had really good friends and I learned a lot from them, but it's not exactly the same thing. So I learned about strength. I learned about determination. I learned about perseverance. I learned about pain at a very young age. And I mean that metaphorically speaking. I mean, we'll talk later probably because I believe pain is a strategic concept. And it was very, very useful for me in terms of my success and so forth. But at a very young age, I mean, having to go through the pain of rejection, the pain of not meeting your own expectations, forget about your parents, and all of those sorts of things. So it was an interesting journey, but man, did it ever prepare me. It really prepared me. I mean, I had a shield and an approach to life going into university and early in my career that other people just didn't have. And to a large extent, I think it was because of my upbringing, my parents, and the values that I learned at a very young age.
Uh, One thing that you said there, meeting your own standards, were you somewhat of a perfectionist?
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, my mother basically made me realize what I needed to be, whether I liked it or not at the time. And so, yeah, I learned that setting the bar was high was what we needed to do, without really intellectualizing it the way we can do now, right? It was just a natural thing for me to do. I was getting A's. That was it. I was getting A's in school. I played sports. I played basketball. I played soccer and those sorts of things, track and field, and the goal was always the same. You had to excel. That was the drive. And when I didn't do it, I felt bad because I disappointed myself first, and then everybody else second. And so that sort of mentality, I think, was very influential throughout all my whole life in terms of how I went into quote battle unquote for the kinds of things that I felt I needed and my organization needed and my career needed and my family needed. Yeah, it was quite formative.
So when you went away to university, I mean, was that right after high school?
Yeah, basically, we called it grade 13 up here, which is really kind of like preliminary university. But I went right into university and spent 4 years getting a bachelor degree in mathematics and computer science. Now, if you can imagine what computer science was like back in the late 60s, early 70s, and nothing compared to what it is today.
Yeah.
But it was kind of cool in the sense that you had to have logic. I mean, it was all based on logic. And I actually attribute university to one thing only, quite frankly. I'll be tough on that. For me, it just taught me how to solve problems. Like I've never solved a business problem in my life using a differential equation that I learned how to do at university, right? I
Yeah.
don't use linear regression analysis to forecast because we can talk about this later. I don't believe in the predictability of anything, quite frankly. And people that actually try perfection in this world are crazy, right? I mean, so there's a whole piece that we can chat about there, but yeah, it taught me how to solve problems, and that's what life is about. That's what business is about. How to quickly solve a problem that you're confronted with, not trying to predict the future, right? Not applying all these gee whiz tools, right? Like the subject matter experts want to do. I mean, subject matter experts in my world didn't like me because I didn't like them. It was as simple as that. So I expected to drive to pull the intellectual property out of people's heads to determine what to do, as opposed to relying on the statistical outcomes of a linear regression equation. Ridiculous. And you know what the problem is? Our students, the people coming into business today, unfortunately, are led to believe that that's the way to do things. It's not the way to do things. You need a good foundation. I'll give you that. But unfortunately, it needs to go further. And that's where Roy comes in because Roy's the practitioner. right? Roy's the guy that kind of figured out what we needed to do, but spent a lot of time trying to sort out how to do it in a way that lit fires in people to capture their, not just their minds, but their hearts and souls, because that's where execution comes from. It doesn't come from the head.
Well, tell me a little bit about really how that drive in you developed. I mean, when you got out of college with a degree in mathematics, did you decide to become an entrepreneur at that point, or you went to work for an organization doing something?
Yes, yes, I went. No, no. I mean, this is looking back, retrospect. Everything makes sense, right? But at the time, of course, you're sort of trying to figure it out as you go. I got out of university. I took a job with the local telephone company in Vancouver called BC Tel as a systems analyst. I got the job because of my math degree. So I was trying to solve systems problems, etc. I was in what they call the data processing department at the time. And so I just started working on micro problems, et cetera, just nose down, working as hard as I could. Um, and then something kind of really amazing happened to me upon reflection. And that is I started to notice that as the markets were changing around us, because if you will recall, way back when telephone companies were a monopoly, and they started to go through a metamorphosis, right, leading to basically transforming the business into a highly competitive business where you could no longer take customers or anything for granted. And it was around that time that I'm down doing my systems work that I started to get more interested in what was going on in the markets, the change in the business, and how that was going to affect us. And I concluded after thinking about this for a while that we weren't ready. Now, this was at a very young age. We weren't ready because I'm a voracious reader. So even though I don't have a marketing degree or a sales degree or stuff, I just read all that kind of stuff. And I learned it through mentors like Seth Godin. I learned it through books. And my conclusion at a very young age was that we were simply not ready. Okay, we're not ready to compete. Okay, the important things to succeed in a competitive world, we were miles from actually achieving them and implementing them in an organization. So I decided that I was going to try and get myself positioned in the organization where I could actually make a contribution that way. My conclusion was we had to be different. So I'm going back. This be different thing, which is my mantra and my brand, started at a very young age and was the result of simply observing that we needed to do a lot of things differently if we were going to survive and thrive in a competitive world. And so I just basically picked up the challenge myself and started pushing and suggesting and driving some programs and convincing people that we needed to get put a customer service strategy together. We needed to be more marketing oriented around price and market share, et cetera. We needed to start thinking about winning a customer's business every day as opposed to simply answering a phone and taking orders, because that was the old way it was being done. And so that's kind of where the germ of Be Different started. And everything that I was asked to do, I always asked myself, okay, how can I do this differently? Okay, I observe things, right? There's a herd of people around me and they're all behaving the same way, right? They lacked imagination. They were comfortable in the herd because everybody protected themselves. But the unfortunate thing is there was no innovation and creativity coming from the herd. So I decided that I'm going to step out of that herd and I'm going to start doing things differently. And that basically has been my life's journey from that sort of time frame, which, as I say, was pretty darn close to 40 years ago when I figured it out. And I observe organizations today, Dave, and I got to tell you, I got some major issues. There's a lot of organizations that have learned nothing, even though the world is so competitive. Customers are fickle. They've got so many alternatives. Technology is changing every 24 hours. And yet the same mistakes are being made now that we made as a monopoly. Okay. And it's all textbook stuff, doing what the textbooks say.
Can you tell me just a few of those mistakes that you see most frequently?
Yeah. I mean, I think the basic one is that even though the world is highly competitive, okay, my observation is that undifferentiation is actually happening. Okay, you would think that in a circumstance of rapid change, customer options, and aggressive competition, you would think that organizations would do a pretty good job of differentiating themselves from their competition. But the reality is they don't. They're mediocre. And let me give you an example. I talk about one of my favorite expressions is claptrap. So a claptrap in this conversation is when companies use phrases like "we're the best," "we're better," "we're number one," "we're market leader." All of those nonsensical expressions that mean diddly squat to a customer who wants to know, why should I do business with you? Okay. The nature of competitive claims today follow claptrap. Okay. And that's why organizations simply can't isolate one another effectively from the customer's point of view. Let me give you a couple of examples of claptrap statements. We have a carrier in Canada who claims that they provide Canada's largest and most reliable 5G network. Okay, like who said that? Who proved that? Okay, what does that even mean? And another one, and you'll know this one. Okay, this coffee company offers the best coffee and espresso drinks for consumers who want premium ingredients and perfection every time. Just two examples of open any book, go Google competitive claims, and this is the stuff you get. Okay, claptrap and aspirations. I mean, we have one company that actually, I love this one, that actually says that they're in business to save our home planet. That's their competitive claim. And I'll leave it to you to figure out who that is. But look, at all of these statements are sort of inside out statements. They're what organizations think of themselves. They are values that they want to aspire to. They are not competitive claims. They are not effective ways to differentiate you from anybody else. So that's the problem. My solution that I figured out very a long time ago was I created what I call the only statement. The only statement says this: we are the only ones who, blah, blah, blah. You got to fill that in, right? The only statement is a binary statement. Dave, it either exists or it doesn't exist. You can see it, you can observe it, you can prove it one way or the other. And I spent my whole life doing this. Easy peasy, right? But hard to do, because a lot of people will say, well, wait a minute, we're not particularly special at anything, Roy. I say, well, okay, if it's really true, then your business is in trouble and you better read Be Different or Be Dead. But I suspect you are. You just haven't figured it out yet and you need some help, because the inertia of claptrap drives people to believe that they're not special. I mean, how can you feel you're special if everybody's talking about the fact that they're the best and without knowing what that means? Okay. And so the only statement is something that I've created and used. I use it myself. I use it in my personal life. I used it in my career. I use it with clients. Okay. And it takes a while to get it. Now, the interesting thing about this is when you're like 80% of the way there, it is magic, because all of a sudden you're talking to your customers in terms of language that they get, because the only statement is derived from what people care about. Okay. Not what you produce. It's got nothing to do with what you produce. It's got to do with what your customers care about. That's the sweet spot that you play the only statement into. Okay. So let me just give you an example. St. John Ambulance is the only first aid advocate that provides safety solutions anywhere, anytime. So what that means is, in the province of British Columbia, if you need a safety solution, by the way, this doesn't say safety products, does it? It says safety solution. So it's a solution to a problem. If you want that at 4 a.m. on a Saturday, done. When they actually configured their organization around that statement, you should have seen it go. This is a not-for-profit, Dave. This isn't even a for-profit organization, right? So the power of the only statement gets rid of claptrap, and now you're trying to figure out how you are unique in a compelling, relevant way that your customers care about. Now, you notice I didn't use the word need. This isn't about customer needs, because everybody's basically got their needs satisfied anyways. It's what you care about, what you crave, what you covet, what you lust for. That's the sweet spot that marketing has to play into with this only statement. And so when you start doing that, by the way, you find out some amazing things, like there's no competition. Nobody's thinking this way. And secondly, you can charge premium prices. Margins look sweet, right? Why aren't more people actually doing this? Is a bit of a disappointment to me. Maybe it's because I'm not doing my job, right? Clarifying it for people and talking about it, etc. But I think organizations today in this whole area of competitive differentiation are trapped. They're trapped by the inertia of the past or momentum of the past. They're trapped by academic thinking that hasn't changed in a billion years around this subject. Marketing 101 still talks about universal selling propositions that use claptrap. Well, if you read that long enough, you're going to believe it's the right way to do it, right? And so Roy comes along and breaks that up, introduces discontinuity, and people go, huh, well, that sounds interesting, right? So now let's have a conversation and get people adopting it. So that's an example, okay? And I would say, from my point of view, it's the main example of what I think is wrong in business today: the lack of the ability to differentiate. And when you have that sort of momentum going on in the market, and every organization is having trouble. And I can tell you, one of the main reasons they're having trouble is they're not special. They're not unique. Nobody cares about what they do because they don't care about providing something that their customers want in a unique and compelling way. And so my angst, my energy is to try and kind of change that a little bit, and hopefully it will catch on. And it's fun because of these sort of podcasts. I got people emailing me now. Roy, check out my only statement. What do you think? Oh man, that's magic. I have conversations about good stuff, not check out my largest network thing. I click.
Nice. You know what really comes to my mind when we're talking about this, you started off on this path over 40 years ago, recognizing that differentiating yourself is going to set you apart and set you in a position to be more successful than your rivals. And that is a huge change from the norm. And I would imagine that it wasn't just easy peasy talking to your bosses like, hey, this is going to make you a lot of money. When you first started out, you were nobody. They probably looked at you like you were an idiot.
Well, I had a lot of rather queasy grins, if you will, when I would go. But and I can't remember all the details way back in day one. All I knew is, in the jobs that I had, I would just take a different approach and talk about it that way. Like I remember this one time, my boss, I had 2 or 3 colleagues of the same level, and we had to create a performance plan for the people in our teams. And so we were each given that task. So we weren't given any format or whatever. It was open, which is great. We were just given a time frame. And I can remember thinking at the time, I know exactly how the other 3 are going to treat this challenge, right? They're going to treat it as, I want to get this thing done so it goes away so I can go back to my real job, right? And all you people listening out there, just think about that. People want tasks to be completed fast. Okay, they just want to get it off their desk. Well, I took a different approach. So what I did is I did a lot of research on different ways of creating career plans, right? And I chose a methodology that was deep and rich and granular in detail. I chose a different kind of packaging for it. Just all of that, the sort of aesthetics part of it. And I actually reviewed it with each of my managers before I submitted it. So the test of reasonableness was that people were okay with it. It wasn't like I was handing it to my boss and then would have to go to talk about it with my people. I convinced my boss that the career plan was right because the people who were being career planned said it was right. Boom. Did anybody else approach the problem that way? No. So guess what happened? Okay, Roy got a star. Okay, now people are leaning. Oh, okay, that was kind of interesting. Let's see if he can do that again. Well, there was a challenge, right? Because you got to keep doing it. I can't remember the other, but it's the same sort of thing. And after a while, I started to get known as the guy who would do things differently. And I was starting to get asked to come into other departments in the organization to help solve problems, right? Because I was kind of leaning into the sort of the edge part of solution development as opposed to the same old, same old. And the other thing that I did was I spent a lot of time getting people's hearts on side with what we were doing. Just like the person who was career planned. I had them. I had their heart. I just had them in my hand because I made them special by talking to them and making the career plan theirs, not mine. Right? So that whole approach about engaging people and lighting fires in people, okay, is such an important part of our quote audacious leadership, that one thing people generally don't spend a lot of time doing. If you think about leaders, they spend a lot of time sitting in their office delegating. We can talk about strategic micromanagement after too, because I don't believe in delegating all that much with certain things. So there you go. I'm out with the frontline people, working with them, understanding what their problems are, helping them. My definition was leadership by serving around. How can I help? And that started at a really young age when the objects of my challenges I engaged where other people didn't. Simple stuff, man. I mean, this is not complicated, but it occurred to me and didn't occur to other people. So that was an example of how it started. And then there's a litany of things that I did as it relates to building this business to $1 billion in sales. We can talk about, which was simply a continuation of that mindset, looking for opportunities to do things differently, throwing out tradition, breaking away from tradition, lighting fires in people in terms of the direction we were going, and fundamentally, and this is a really important my theme was execution. Okay, everything I did, okay, was made to execute better. Why? Because performance doesn't come from the mind. It comes from execution. And so as a leader, everything I did, all the crazy things I did had one objective and only one objective: to facilitate more effective execution in the organization and drive better performance. I mean, we didn't know we were going to get $1 billion in annual sales, but when we did, we looked upon some of the stuff that we did and went, okay. I mean, collectively, that's what got us here. And it wasn't traditional stuff. It just wasn't. And so when you think about being different, you got to have a theme. For me as a leader, it was, I got to be different to execute the plan better. Why? Because it's going to drive performance. And that's what my job is. My job isn't to do cool HR things, Dave. No, it ain't. My job is to drive 25, 30% growth in top line consistently through harnessing the power of people. That was my job. And so the stuff that I did was oriented and driven to produce those results.
You started your professional career at a phone company and figured out this concept of being different. And from the phone company, where did you go after that?
Never left.
You never
See,
left.
the phone company never, well, no, it became a communications company. It became a competitive enterprise. It became a national competitive enterprise. And I look at it this way: I worked myself around and up. So eventually, I mean, here's what people don't get. A large corporation, people say, well, yeah, I just work for the telephone company. What does Roy know about business? Well, let me tell you, a large organization has got tons of opportunities if you want to take advantage of. There are so many businesses. I led monopolies. I led sales. I led marketing. I led business units. I was a chief marketing officer. I led a startup to $1 billion in sales. Okay, I would never have had those opportunities if I'd left the telco and said to myself, "Well, I'm gonna just go and get another job." That's a bit unfair. Maybe I would have, but that's all reflection. Um, but yeah, so I worked. I've only had one employer,
Well,
other than myself.
the startup,
Mhm.
that wasn't the phone company, or was it
Yeah,
a startup within the phone company?
yeah, that's what it was. You see, because here's the deal, right? The phone company was a voice company for 100 years, right? Voice culture, voice network, voice marketing, voice services, blah, blah, blah. Along comes deregulation. And with deregulation and technological change, along comes, guess what? The internet. Well, we were in the data business long before the internet hit us because banks were using data to transfer funds and also. So we had a foundation, but not nearly right as effective and as large as it had to be to actually be a player in the data space, data slash internet, because then it was starting moving to internet protocol, et cetera. It became one sort of opportunity, and we called it data slash internet. I was asked to be the president of the company and basically take it to where we needed to take it. Well, the challenge was interesting because don't forget, we had a voice culture, a voice dominated culture. So one of the things that we had to do was figure out how to move that culture into a highly competitive data culture that had different skill set requirements, different competencies, et cetera, et cetera. And so that wasn't an easy feat. And, we had to go through some challenges about people and et cetera, et cetera, and recreating our values, et cetera. And now, by the way, the business that I had the opportunity to lead is now 15 billion a year. Okay, so I'm a failure. I only got one. So what I'm saying is the growth parts of telecom are what they have to be because of the way the market's going. But there's also all sorts of challenges, and we had union issues, right? So don't forget, telephone companies were always highly unionized, and ours was no different. And so one of the things we had to do is convince our union to do things differently, right? Give up some of that seniority stuff, because if we don't win in the market in now, I mean, we can't go to the regulator for a rate increase, okay? Like you could when you were a monopoly. You can't do that anymore. You got to fight for business every day with hungry competitors. And by the way, the regulator actually had our high hands in certain respects tied behind our back because they favored competition. So they gave the competitors, right, an uneven playing field. So that was just another kind of challenge we had. So it was almost despite those challenges, we had to make it successful. Now the good news is, it didn't take me long to figure out that we had a large base of loyal voice customers, and I was going to use that base like you had no idea. We owned them. We owned them. So now what we had to do is figure out a way to actually take them into the data internet world with us. Future is friendly. That's what we had to do. I get goosebumps just thinking about that. You know that, huh? You're taking me way back there, man. This is fun.
Well, before we started recording, you know, you let me know that it wasn't all rainbows and butterflies, because this story that you've laid out for me really sounds like it's all been, smooth sailing. You got everything you needed, and your innovations were well received, and you just accomplishment after accomplishment. It wasn't like that. Like, you hit some brick walls along the way, I'm certain of it. What were those lessons that you learned through those, you know, little stumbling blocks?
Well, there was well, I mentioned pain earlier. I mean, it didn't take me long to figure out that pain was, in fact, a strategic concept, because if you couldn't endure pain, which is a metaphor for moving forward despite the odds and the backstabbing and the, and all the objections that people like me run into, then you would never make any progress. So literally at every step, people questioned what we were doing. Now, the good news is I had a boss who was a friend who trusted me. Okay. Without whom, well, who knows what would have happened. He wouldn't have got $1 billion in annual sales, I can tell you that. So, but fortunately, he had enough. We had a lot of time together, so he knew me really well. So he gave me the degrees of freedom that I demanded in order to do what we had to do. Okay, but that's just the boss, right? I mean, now you're dealing with a whole organization that basically we're looking at these changes that they couldn't understand. Okay, and let me give you one example. I launched a program called the Dumb Rules program. You know, a dumb rule is actually a rule that makes absolutely no sense to a customer whatsoever. All it does is piss them off, and it makes them not want to do business with us. And for you out there that work in organizations that don't think you have dumb rules, you just haven't asked your frontline people. So we had these things. So it was part of my, what I call cleanse the inside. Now, why would I want to cleanse the inside of roadblocks and barriers and dumb rules, Dave? Well, I wanted to do that to execute better, which drove performance again, right? So I'm just totally execution. So we started this program. I mean, people in the organization, I'd show up in a front line or a call center, and I had a white T-shirt on with dumb rules written on the front with a big X through them, right? And so I was in the workplace every day practically with these, promoting the contest. So what was it? It wasn't a contest, it was a program. So what we did is we just solicited dumb rules and said, look, okay, we're going to have contests. You guys come to us with the dumbest, stupidest thing we do that piss customers off, and we're going to get rid of it or change it, because some of the stuff you can't change, but at least you can try and make it customer friendly, right? You wouldn't have believed what happened. I mean, we are getting all of these things, all these suggestions and dumb rules, which we just gradually just knocked down one by one by one by one. I held my management team accountable. So their performance plan was to aid and abet killing dumb rules. Now try and find a performance plan out there somewhere that the HR guys wouldn't get upset about if you ever called killing dumb rules. But people looked at that and went, well, that right. In fact, my CFO at the time says, Roy, you can't call them killing dumb rules. I said, why not? Well, the language is, you're a president of a company. What? I said, okay, okay, I won't call them dumb rules. I'll call them stupid things. How about that? No, you can't call them stupid things. I said, that's why we're going to call them dumb rules. And so it stuck. People got to know it. We had contests. We had winners, celebrations in the workplace, just simple stuff. People were just on fire because finally they had somebody senior in the company who understood the strategic power of stupid rules in terms of customer engagement. Okay, name me one president that gets involved in a rule system in an organization. I can't think of any. And so that's an example of what I call strategic micromanagement. You micromanage the things that are critical to what? The execution of your strategy. Why? To drive performance. And I did that. And I concluded that if I didn't cleanse the inside of this company, okay, we were going to have barriers and bureaucracy and roadblocks and cheesed off customers that will not allow us to grow. So I did something about it. And when I did, I attracted all, here they came. I mean, everybody came out, told me what a dumb idea it was until they actually saw it working. So that's an example of something that we believed was important to do, started doing it, and basically managed the flack. That's what you have to do, manage the flack. And just don't be put off by that. And you wouldn't have any idea the amount of conversations that people wanted to have with me to tell me how stupid I was. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. And I said, okay, I hear you. I tell you what, if it doesn't work, I'll change it. What are you going to change it to? I'm going to change it to another program called Cut the Crap. It's the same bottom lines, part of cleanse the inside, get rid of the stuff that's bureaucratic and blah, blah, blah. And I said, and I want the internal auditors on this team because, 30% of the dumb rules and crap are caused by control freaks called internal auditors. And I had some interesting conversations with them as well. And so it was just kind of like a day in the life of, okay? Yeah. A day in the life of Be Different. I've never thought about it that way, Dave. You just pulled that out of me. I'm going to use that day in the life of. That's got a lot of posting social media potential, don't you think?
Yeah. 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 That might be a part of the title of this interview.
A day in the life of. Man, I get tired just thinking about some of that stuff. I got to tell you.
So I want to touch on your book series. We talked a little bit about it before before we started recording.
Right.
Now, did you become a blogger before your first book, or how did that all evolve? Because it's a series.
Yeah, interesting story. First of all, I left. I left my company as the chief marketing officer. So I went from the president of the data company. Then they needed a more CMO, so I was asked to do that. And then very shortly after, I decided that it was time to move on. In 2002. Okay, so I've been without a quote real job for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So when I left, I did the normal thing because I really didn't have that much free time when I was working. And so we did a lot of traveling, et cetera, et cetera. And then one day in Vegas, my wife turned to me and she says, well, it's September. What are you going to do now? And I thought, okay, there's a disguised question. So I said, I don't know. What do you think? And she says, well, you've always had so much fun talking to people about customer service and marketing and the different things you did. Why don't you just go do that? I said, okay, I understand that, but I don't know that I still have the content in my head. So I sat down and I started driving out some PowerPoint slides. Well, I drove out 500 PowerPoint slides. So I had the content. Once it got rolling, it just came out. So I just went on a pro bono kind of like a gig with the chambers of commerce and small business and any organization that wanted to kind of hear about my stuff, because I had good contacts in Vancouver and BC. So people knew who I was because of my role with the telco, right? So I had lots of opportunities to get in front of people. And I did a variety of presentations. One of the things I didn't do is I never provided handouts, okay? Because I was concerned about not wanting to share. Stupid, crazy. Anyways, so it turns out that people were getting quite upset about the fact that I wasn't giving them handouts. And one day, this one guy says, Roy, okay, I get that you don't want to give out handouts, okay? But why don't you just write a book? So the book actually originated from this sort of this series of presentations that I started giving once I quote retired, and the subject of the one that people really loved was called Be Different or Be Dead. It was all about what you and I have been just talking about, differentiation. This was in, okay, we're talking early 2000s here, okay? That's how far this subject goes and the need to differentiate goes, the conversation goes. It's not a new conversation. So anyways, I said, okay, I'll work on it. So I wrote my first book and published it in 2009. It called Be Different or Be Dead, Your Business Survival Guide. So the basic notion was differentiation from a business point of view, marketing, sales, service, because I've led all of those. So it was very broad and in subject matter, the scope, and people really liked it. I went through a second edition, but one of the things that they said is we really like to learn a bit more about how this applies to careers. A little more about the only statement, Roy. Give me some more stuff about the marketing piece. And so that led to writing four ebooks, just with vertical slices, leading up to last year when I decided to update basically the whole subject, because I learned so much about my content by talking about it with guys like you and so forth, right? It just opens stuff up for me. Again, it's very rich and a very deep subject to actually have a conversation about. And so in May, I wrote and published through Morgan James in New York my 7th book, called Be Different or Be Dead. But the spin this time, and the focus this time, was leveraging it around growth as opposed to survival, right? Growth, and getting a little more granular about some of the stuff that you and I just talked about, right? Some of the work around the only statement that I've learned working with clients, etc. And so that's what kind of led to the last book in the series. And yeah, and the interesting thing is, I mean, people are still interested in 6 acts of leadership, for example, which is one of the ebooks that I wrote, which just dives into leaders. And they're interested in marketing in the storm, which is my spin on what you need to do from a marketing point of view, because whether you know it or not, you're in the storm, dude. You're not in a nice, calm marketplace here. You need to do it. And I wrote one specifically on how to power up your career as well. So people are kind of interested in that. So yeah, there's a series.
Where's the best place to get a hold of these books in your series?
Well, come visit me at bedifferentorbedead.com. And so I've got a page on the books there. It gives you a bit more information on them. And the other thing that I'd encourage your listeners to do is check out my blog. Like, I've been writing about this stuff since 2009. Okay, so I became a blogger when it was a means to put my content in front of people. I ended up in social media as a means to get my content in front of people. Okay, so subscribe to my blog. I blog every week on a different angle of Be Different or Be Dead. And I'm hard on some organizations. I'm hard on behaviors that I think are dysfunctional because they don't lead to productive outcomes and high performance. So people can check out my blog as well. But at the end of the day, I have an email, roy.osing@gmail.com, and I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation with people. I mentioned earlier, I get emails from people sending me their draft only statements. Roy, check this out. Or Roy, I've been asked to do this in my career and it doesn't feel right. What do you think? So all I do is just give them a different set of eyes, different perspective, not trying to be prescriptive in any way, just saying, hey, if you want an opinion, I got lots of opinions, and I'm not going to shy away from giving you an opinion, and take it for what it's worth. And so I'm happy to engage with people in any way they want, Dave.
And so my book, Fireproof, I published through Morgan James Publishing
Did
as
you?
well.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
David's an awesome dude.
it just released October 11th.
Oh, well, how come I didn't see that? Well, maybe it was before we hooked up, I think, probably.
Well, what's interesting is I wanted it to release in May, and it was the time frame was too compressed. But man, there's some really good authors that I've been meeting from Morgan James, and it's interesting through our conversations in the interviews that I discover that it's Morgan James was their publisher. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it is
And
cool.
so far, how have you liked them as your publisher?
Oh, they've been great. I mean, they've got a great business model. They provide terrific service. They make the author the center of their attention, and that's as it should be. I mean, so there's really good kind of like business principles that David understands, and in fact more than understands, he executes on it.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of time for them. But the truth, we'll see. I mean, we're coming up to 6 months, so we'll see what the reports say. And I'm super excited about finding out exactly where I'm going to be at the end of 6 months, and it's a bit stressful, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to finding out my sales next year. So it'd be pretty cool because what does it take? It takes like what, 3 months to really get a
Well,
sense?
I was told that the reports will be out in 6 months, so I'm coming up to 6 months. And for me, it's just well, I guess it's kind of like an indicator, okay, of whether the content is resonating with people. And I've only been doing these. I've done about 45 podcasts since before the book was launched. Because again, David's suggestion, I love the format. I just love the conversational format, etc. And so we'll see whether, hopefully, that will make a difference and will help me spread my word. But at the end of the day, the sales will be kind of like an indicator of whether that's working or not, and that'll cause me to do something else depending on the result. What I tell you, why my content resonates with people, because they get it. It's simple, okay? It's not complex. I mean, look at a leader's job is to dumb it down so people get it, so they can apply their heart to something. I do that. It's not like, I don't take you to a formula, right? I beat the hell out of formulas. People love that because they don't believe in them either. And so that's how it kind of resonates. And if you can communicate that with passion and conviction and a good platform, so much the better.
Yeah, I think it's really awesome how when you talk about leaders and truly great leaders, the people that follow them, they follow them because they believe that they're going to be better for having done so. And when people will have followed you, they see the successes that you've had and they hear the message and it resonates because being different, it not you know not all the time, but in your case, the different that you're bringing them is better than what the other organizations have been doing. When you see the same thing over and over and over again, we all do, what's the difference between this and that? The price? I mean, is that really, or the packaging? It's the same product. What can we do, especially, the entrepreneurs? And I mean, even when you talk about, I mean, you mentioned the EMS providers. I come from the fire department. Worldwide, the fire service, what are they doing to set themselves apart? And I don't know that, I mean, there are truly great fire departments, and then there's the ones that, look like a circus act.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing is they just don't know. They're just going through the rote of what they believe they should be doing without creating what I would call a strategic context for what they do. Like when I work with a client, I start at the very beginning. Well, you mentioned startups. I mean, I love working with startup CEOs because the first question I ask them is, explain to me how your idea is different than what's out there. And if you can't, stop spending money and go figure it out. Because generally what they'll do is they'll tell you about the sexiness of the technology, right? And all the AI tools it uses, blah, 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 which to me isn't even important. If you have an idea that's the same as everybody, who cares? And so get the kids off the street and tell me how it's different. Because I mean, and it happens all the time. I mean, I will rarely find somebody who's really thought this out. And so I try and spend a lot of time in my blogs and talking to people like this to say, look, at first question, forget about the technology. Let's think about the idea and tell me how it's different. Why should I buy your new idea as opposed to somebody else's? And don't tell me it's hard work and you're going to focus on the product. Now they can get away with it because unfortunately marketing 101 focuses on the product, not on how the product is different. I mean, even the chapters on unique selling propositions, they're not really unique at all. I mean, I had a conversation the other day with a guy, and I was talking about this, and he says, look, my approach is, we need ideas, right, that address the pain people are feeling. And I said, no, that's not right. Okay, you need new ideas that address the pain in a unique way. Finish the sentence, for God's sake. I mean, just because you have a solution to a problem doesn't mean you have a differential advantage. And yet that's what's being promulgated.
Yeah.
Okay. And I see it on social media every bloody day, and I'm getting tired of it. And I try and go back and give them some, come gee whiz, blah, blah, blah. But it's this notion of, okay, your product does this to solve this problem in a way that nobody else does. Finish the sentence. Please finish the sentence. That tells me you've at least thought through the important part of it. But to come up with a solution to a problem in and of itself doesn't guarantee anything. Nothing. I mean, end of story. QED, Dave.
Well, what's next on the horizon for you? Do you have another book in you, or is 7 the last one?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm a guy that believes in planning on the run. Okay, you can read about this in my book. It says, set about sort of a journey. We'll sort of head west, and we'll start to experience the journey as we head west, and we'll learn where to go out west, whether it's Vancouver, whether it's San Francisco, whatever. And I'm kind of like that way with this content right now. It's like I'm just enjoying the moment. I'm in the moment, talking to guys like you, enjoying the experience, trying to convince people, and seeing some, pupils dilate every once in a while, which is kind of cool. And so as long as I have the energy and momentum, I'll just keep doing it. If another book if idea pops up, then of course. But it'll be a function of doing this that'll happen. It's not going to be cognitive, right? It's just not. Right. Like I have this phrase called, you got to eat your own dog food. Okay, what that means is you got to practice what you preach. So Roy is a planner, a guy that plans on the run. So if another book pops out during my running, that'll be the genesis, and I'll go to work on it. I'm just happy doing what I'm doing right now, and we'll see where it goes.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I will have links in the show notes, and everybody listening, you got to check this out. I mean, I really hope that you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. This is sure to be a book series that the people listening to this show are really going to be able to dig into and take away some stuff. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
Very welcome. And again, I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak with you and your audience. Truly, I am.
Thank you for listening to this episode of From Embers to Excellence. Please visit hollenbachleadership.com for additional content, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review.